Hi, I'm Hann from Archery Supplies. Today I want to do a video on selecting a recurve bow for target archery and setting it up. When you walk into an archery shop, the biggest question I get asked is I don't know whether I want to buy a recurve or a compound bow. I'm going to do a video on that. But I want to talk about the recurve bow that you select. The biggest factor is going to be price, how much money you want to spend on a total setup. And you don't need to spend a lot of money to have an effective target setup. This bow here is the PSE X Appeal. You don't need to spend this amount of money to shoot good scores. I choose this bow purely because I shoot every day and I want to see how good I can shoot. I set myself a standard, and basically I said if I hit that standard, then I'll buy myself a decent, an expensive bow. So you can get away with a basic kit, which is probably around $200. It won't look like this, but it will still have the same sort of effect. So have your budget in mind, but one of the most important things you're going to think about is the poundage I want to shoot. Now with me, I shoot compound archery. With a compound bow I shoot around 60 pounds. I shoot every single day. I do weightlifting. With a recurve I started at 32 pounds, and what I found with 32 pounds was I fatigued after about 30 arrows, and my last 30 arrows, so my middle 30 scores were pretty average, my last 30 were very poor. So I was fatiguing in strength at 32 pounds. But as I got shooting the bow, I found 32 pounds became light. So then I moved up to 36 pounds. At 36 pounds, I continued shooting that until that felt light, and now I've moved to 42 pounds. I took a break for 2 weeks and my poundage felt so heavy I couldn't shoot. I was shaking all around the place and my scores were horrible. I'm now starting to get back to it. When I say get back to it, I'm shooting regular arrows, lots of arrows, and now my scores and my grips are pulling in. So poundage is really important when you select your poundage. And how are you going to know what poundage to select? It's a very hard thing because it depends on how much you shoot. The more you shoot, the easier the poundage will be for you. The less you shoot, the lighter poundage you'll need. It also depends on how many arrows you're going to shoot. If you're going to shoot 100 arrows a day, 200 arrows a day, less poundage. And basically what you're going to have to do is, if you find the bow too light, you're going to need stronger limbs. Most of the bows you'll buy will have interchangeable limbs, even on a cheap wooden recurve, even on the $200 set I spoke about at the start. You can buy replacement limbs or sell the bow off and buy a whole new bow, because you're going to get about half the price back on the bow. So the $200 set, you'll probably sell that kit down the club for $120 to a beginner, and then you just buy yourself another kit for $200. So it's cost you $80 to change the poundage, which is cheaper than buying a whole new bow. So basically recurves come in different sizes. 70 inches, which is the length of the bow right around the limbs, not the length from there to there. It's 3.5 inches shorter than that. So they come in 70 inch, 68 inch and 66. For a regular bloke, and I'm going to say a bloke, 5'10", 5'11", that sort of size, 68 inches is the size you want. Now most women are now shooting 68 inches also. 66 inches in the past was the common size for a woman who is about 5'9", 5'8". But what you're finding now is lots of women are choosing a longer bow to get less finger pinch and less hurt on the arrows, because the longer the bow, the less angle on the string. So the advantage of a shorter bow, a shorter bow has a shorter brace height here to here, so it makes the bow quicker. A longer bow will have a bigger brace height from there to there, so it will make the bow slightly shorter but less finger pinch. So 68 inches is that nice size in the middle. Now if you're tall, you have 70 inches, and on expensive bows like with carbon risers and expensive risers, you do have the option of a 27 inch riser, and some companies do make 26 inch risers, so you're getting 72 inch bows. But that's only on the expensive recurves. So once you've chosen your poundage, chosen your length, it gets down to how much you want to spend on your accessories. A basic sight is going to cost you maybe $15. The sight I chose on this one is the Win and Win carbon one, and I chose this because I shoot every single day, and I didn't want stuff coming loose. So for me, this sight, let's say, is around $270. A $15 sight, the sight is going to come loose and the knobs are going to come loose. This sight has micro adjustment left to right, up and down, and it's used by Olympians. So at the Olympics you will see this sight being used. And I figured for myself how much I shoot, and I've had this sight literally forever. I didn't want a sight I have to replace. I may replace my bow, but I'm going to keep the gear. So when you choose a sight for your bow, $15 is pretty basic. Plastic sight, which generally won't have micro adjustment, and the screws on it will come loose, but it is $15. When you go up to around the $45-50 mark, the sights become metal, but you will still have issues with the sight screws coming loose. Then you go up to about $130 odd. The sights become better, they become carbon, and the screws are less likely to come loose, but may still come loose. So I found at $250 it's a blend between the $500 sight and the cheaper sight, but it's up to you to work out your budget. So you will need a sight. This little thing on the side here, this is called a plunger button, and what this does here, it pushes the arrow away from the bow. Now why is this important? I'll just grab an arrow. The arrow, when lined up with the center of the bow and center of the grip, the arrow needs to be slightly on this side of the string. Without the plunger button, the arrow would push in there and it wouldn't shoot. Now plunger buttons vary in price from about $15 to about $160. Now I have used the $160 plunger button and they are lovely. I'm actually using a $20 plunger button right now, and I'm shooting exactly the same scores as I did with the $200 plunger button. Now I would say the $150 plunger button is much nicer as far as micro adjustment and feel than the $20 plunger. However, for me, I wanted to try the different plunger buttons out, and I was just trying this bow out and I was like, I don't want to really put an expensive plunger on it, but I've been shooting this bow now for about 4 or 5 months with the cheap plunger button. So for me as a beginner, I'm happy to spend $20 on a plunger button. But if you've got a $2,000 setup and money's no object, by all means go and buy yourself the top of the win plunger button, or the top of the line biter plunger button. Now I have a thing called a clicker here. Now I don't recommend this for beginners. So what this does here is you put the arrow under the clicker and it goes on like that. Now what this does, as you pull back the arrow, this will go click. Sorry, my hand's in the way. It goes click, and what that ensures is you draw back the bow the same length every time, so you get the same poundage every time. Now the reason I don't recommend it for a beginner is changing their form, changing their style. They don't want to think about the click going off. So I would suggest, after you've been shooting for a few months to recurve, by all means add a clicker button to the bow, because by that stage your form will be should be pretty much established, and hopefully this will then improve your accuracy. Now clickers vary in price from $5. I'm shooting a carbon clicker here from Win. This clicker is $40. The reason I'm choosing a carbon clicker over a magnetic clicker or anything else, the carbon matched my previous bow. It was red, it was new, and I thought it looked cool. Is it any better than the $15 clicker? I don't know, honestly. The biter clicker, $15, works perfectly fine. I do like the carbon, I do like this clicker. Nothing's come loose on this clicker. It is carbon, and I figure if I've spent $2,000 on my bow and all the rest of the money, the difference between $15 and $40 is not a lot. But even the $5 clicker will work. Now I want to talk about stabilizers. Now this stabilizer up the top here is just a dampener. What this does is absorbs vibration and a bit of shock. Does it do anything? I'm going to say no. Basically it looks good. That's the idea, it looks good. It costs around $20 odd, $25. Now if it absorbs a bit of vibration, well and good. But basically I've got it there just to match this and the weights. So I'd be more than happy to shoot without it, but once again, $20. Now the stabilizers. Now I'm using expensive stabilizers because these match my last bow. My last bow was a Win Wireless, and these matched in color and shape and all that. And I really like these stabilizers, but they're expensive. $250 odd for the main stabilizers. The side stabilizers are around 80. I've got these little dampeners which are around $20 each. And what do these dampeners do? When the vibration comes down the stabilizer, it hits the weight, and what it does, it stops the vibration coming back to me, coming back to the bow. You can shoot without the dampeners, it's up to you. Now cheap stabilizers, so a cheap set of SF Axiom stabilizers for the front bar, you're looking at around $40. The back bars are around $30 each, so around $100 odd. The V-bar here, I'm choosing a carbon one, and honestly it's probably $70. A cheap $20 V-bar will do the job. I have the carbon one because I think it looks cool. I have an extender here. Now the purpose of the extender is to move the weight forward in the bow. Now to me, is that extender going to do much? And I've shot with and without them, and I've coached people with and without them, and I'm going to say no, it doesn't do much. What it does, it moves the whole balance forward of the stabilizers. And the reason I fitted one was just so it looks uniform, but I've shot with people who don't have them and they have shot Australian records with them, so I'm going to say it doesn't make a lot of difference. Now stabilizers do make a difference. These rods basically stop you shaking around the target. The more weight you have at the front, the more weight you have back here, the harder it is to move. But you don't want so much weight that you physically struggle to hold up the bow. So from the standard weights that come with the Win stuff, I've added more. These are quite cheap crux weights from Cartel. They may be $25 for a bunch like that. So to me, stabilizers, even on a basic kit like a $200 kit, should be something that you consider because it has the biggest impact of all the archery gear. Now what's really important is the string on the bow. The string on the bow, there's quite different variances. You've got Dacron, you've got Fast Flight, and BCY 48125, I think, or 8190. Now I found the BCY, I think it's 8190 or 8125, the exactly same speed as Fast Flight, which really surprised me. I did a chronograph test on them both, and they are both identical. Now I would prefer Fast Flight over Dacron because there's less stretch and it's going to be faster. A Fast Flight string is going to cost you around $15. A Dacron string costs around $20. Now what's really important is how the arrow sits on the string. Now this is mine. It goes on with a click, and see the arrow doesn't come off. And that's how much force is required to remove this arrow from that string. So if the knock is too tight, it's too hard to remove and you'll get cracking on the knocks. If it's too loose, the arrow will fall straight off the string. So it's really important to have the knocks being the right size for the string. Now knocks come in two sizes, small and large generally. Some knocks don't, some knocks just come in one size, and in which case if the string doesn't fit, you can change the size of the serving on the middle. That's very, very important. Now these two little things I've got here, these are tied on knocking points. Now previously I've shot with metal knocking points, and one of my viewers said, why aren't you using tied on knocking points? And I thought, oh, okay, I'll try the tie on knocking points. Absolutely no difference. Like nothing, scores don't improve, nothing. The tie on knocking point, to me, is it better or worse? It probably takes a bit longer to fit. It probably creates less marks on my finger tab, but it wouldn't worry me one way or the other. In fact, my scores before with the metal knocking points, like I said, it didn't make any difference. What makes a difference is your shooting. The more you practice, the better scores you will shoot. But that's basically my compound, my recurve bow. And like I said, you can get away with a basic recurve bow. Now my basic recurve bow that I owned before this and before the last one, I started with an SF forged riser, about $300, with some foam limbs, about $200, basic set of stabilizers. basic set of arrows, and I think I spent, number at the top of my head, 500 for the bow, sights, under $1,000. Now my scores with that bow were almost the same as this bow. Now this bow here, I've got invested in this bow maybe $3,000. So money doesn't buy you the overall much of an increase. It does buy something, but maybe more the better off you shoot. So if I was an elite archer, then I may notice some difference between a $500 bow and a $2,000 bow. And if I go back in time to 1980, when Rick McKinney was shooting aluminium arrows with basic wood limbs, his scores were far, far superior to most archers in this country. So, but he used to shoot all day. But you look at the scores today, and the scores today are not that much higher than what he used to shoot all those years ago. So, but they are higher, and there's far more people shooting the higher scores now than there was back in those days. So gear has improved, there's no question about that. And what has changed is a lot of people are not training as hard as they used to, because they've got to work, they've got to pay off a mortgage and everything else. So the basic recurve bow, going back to it, the choice of limbs, you've got the choice of a wood limb or a foam limb. Now I prefer foam limbs because with a wood limb they can twist. They're affected by temperature and can warp with time. Where a foam limb, I'm going to say it's impossible for a foam limb to warp or twist. And I have had them returned to me, but on every case they have not been warped, and it's been the riser. The person was fitting a incompatible riser with that limb, and once I fitted them on a standard riser, that wasn't an issue. So I would always recommend foam limbs, and in fact on all the foam limbs I've sold, I have not had a single issue with a foam limb. Wood limbs are pretty good these days, and especially with the SF Win and Win brand of wood limbs. I would say last year I had one replacement. I can't recall it, but I probably did one out of maybe 500 I sold. So, but in the past my warranty return rate was about 50% on another brand I used to sell. So basically the bow, the little arrow rest. Now the choice of a flipper arrow rest, the arrow rest I'm using here is an FS flipper, SF Elite rest. It costs about $19. You can shoot a Hoyt stick-on rest, which costs $5, or a Cartel stick-on rest, which costs $2. They all work perfectly fine. I like the little flipper rest because it kicks in when you shoot it. Very, very simple. Now, arrows. I find arrows the most critical thing as far as archery is concerned. Many people come in my shop and they don't want to spend a lot on arrows. If you buy cheap arrows, you're going to get really poor results. So for me, arrows are, I'm going to say, more important than the bow, because with bad arrows, if they're not straight and everything else, they're not going to hit the target straight. So, and then you're going to shoot, and even if you shoot a good score, the arrow is going to shoot off. So you're not getting the encouragement to shoot a good shot. You're not getting the encouragement to practice more, because the arrows are just no good. They're just not hitting the target. So for me, arrows are the most important thing in your setup. Now you don't need to spend a lot of money on arrows. I'm just going to put my bow down. Customers come in my shop and they go, well, I'm on a budget, I've got $2 per arrow to spend. Okay, well, you're probably not going to get a very good arrow. These nocks, I shoot a pin system on my arrow, so when I shoot my nocks off, the arrows are protected. These nocks cost almost $2 each. So when a person comes in my shop and says, oh, I've got a budget of $2 per arrow to spend, you know, it's just the way life is. Buy yourself some decent arrows. These arrows are Win and Win Tornado arrows. They cost, ballpark, unmade up, $170 for a set. Made up, $220 a set. The set down from this is .003 straightness. They cost about $170 made up for a dozen. These are a thin carbon arrow with a good target point, a good pin system at the back end. These arrows honestly are as good as anything else, even as good as the X10s, which are $700 odd. And people are going to say, no, you're going to shoot a lot better with X10s. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. And I say that because maybe I would shoot better scores with the X10s. But when I miss the target, when the arrow doesn't go in the 10, I know it's me, it's not these arrows. So yes, I may shoot better scores with X10s, but at $700 compared to $200, and I know the scores are related to me and not the arrows. If I was perfect, I would probably shoot X10s or the equivalent Carbon Express or another expensive brand. But for me, nice affordable arrows are good things to shoot, and you don't cry when you break them. Saying that, I've broken 4 of these arrows. The target fell off the stand, arrows got crunched by the target. I think I've broken 4 all totaled, but I blow off heaps of knocks. So yeah, so buy yourself some decent arrows, $200 a dozen, you're going to be set. Now, arm guards, I don't shoot an arm guard. $5 is going to be fine for an arm guard. $15. I do have the $50 win-and-win one because it matched my bow and it matched my colors. $5 is going to work fine. The $50 one looks pretty. Now, what's really important is the finger tap. Now, if you're shooting under 36 pounds, you won't need Cardovan leather. This is Cardovan. It's a harder leather. You'll be fine with super leather. Super leather is a softer leather, and it'll be more than adequate for your needs. You can get away with finger tabs at a price of around $20 odd for a basic finger tab if you're under 36 pounds. At 36 pounds, you'll probably find your fingers hurt too much with a soft tab, and you're going to need harder leather. Now, Cardovan tabs are more expensive. They start at a price of around $45, and they work up to probably around $120 for the win-and-win, $100 for the Simon Fairweather tab. So somewhere Keswick Lee tab around $100 in the Cardovan leather. Now, I shoot this tab a lot, as you can probably see. It's $100, but I wouldn't recommend this for a light poundage and not for a beginner. Unless you're going to shoot 40 odd pounds and money's no object. So there are cheaper versions of Cardovan, like I said, $40. That's just up to you to choose. Now, when setting up a recurve, always buy a bowstring and a string your bow. And I'm just going to grab the bow. What's really important, what I've found when setting up the recurve, is the string. The arrow is on the string at 90 degrees. I go fractionally higher, so just a smidge higher than 90 degrees. I find with the compound it gives the arrow a slight direction, so I go literally like 1 millimeter higher, 2 bits of paper thickness higher than 90 degrees. How do I determine my arrows on the string at 90 degrees? I use a bow square. You can use a normal square from the garage, T-square, basically 90 degrees. When I set up the plunger button here, the little button, I want the arrows sitting, I line up the string with the center of the bow right down the center, and I want the arrows sitting slightly on this side of the string. It sits on this side so the arrow moves away from the arrow rest when shot. The other thing I want to set up when I look at my arrow is I want the plunger button, the arrow to be in the middle of the plunger button. So it's important when you set up this rest, you can see this rest here has the ability to move. You can bend the wire to move the arrow rest up and down. So the arrow rest sits in the middle of the plunger button. Now, when I put these little rests on, I'm just going to move this in. I actually put little bends in the arrow rest. Now, why I do that is it encourages the arrow to move in towards the bow. If it's dead flat, which is how it often comes from the factory, I find it can actually fall off the rest, and especially with beginners, if they touch the arrow will fall off the rest, and you don't want that, especially if you're shooting in your backyard. So I just grab 2 pairs of pliers and I just give it a little bend up and give it a little bit of an angle in that little rod, so it's basically sitting at a slight little angle. That's basically it. Then shoot. Now, people are going to say, how about paper tuning? How about bare shaft tuning? Yes, all important things, but if you're a beginner, it's more important to start shooting. It's more important to put those arrows down up close to the target and start enjoying shooting. Now, if you've got this arrows matched correctly to the bow, the correct spine, once again, choosing arrows is critical. So if you've got the correct spine and you've set the arrows up at 90 degrees and the plunger button slightly on that side, the arrow rest, I found the bows shoot pretty good. Now, people are going to say about pressure button tension. I found it didn't make a lot of difference, and I've done a video on tuning the Recurve bow. I spent tuning the bow hours, and I found very little difference. The biggest difference I found to tuning was the spine of the arrow. If I had the correct arrows, I just got immediate results. If I had the wrong arrows, I found my grips were more erratic. So to me, once again, shooting is really important. The more you shoot, the better you're going to shoot. Sure, paper tune, bare shaft tune, which is basically shoot through a bit of paper or shoot an arrow without fletchers and see if it hits the same spot. But it's more important to shoot, because have a goal. When I started tuning this Recurve, I said, well, my goal is to shoot 2 hours a day. There was no scores involved. It was just 2 hours a day. Let's shoot 2 hours a day and see what happens. Let's see what pain I feel through my body. Let's hear how my fingers hold up. And then my goal was, after that, was to move to 45 pounds. So to continue shooting 2 hours a day and to move to 45 pounds, I've moved to 36 to 42. I've got one more poundage I'd like to make a jump on. Now, is any of this going to improve my scores? I'm going to say you can shoot good scores on a light poundage, but this was my goal. Yours can be completely different. My goal was to move to 45. The reason I wanted to move to 45 was the top Olympic archers are all shooting high poundages, and if I want to compete at a longer distance, not just the short distances, I figure I need the higher poundage. Now, there's going to be an argument there that you can shoot perfectly fine with a light poundage. Unfortunately, I don't know anyone who shot a world record or have won major world tournaments who shoot a light poundage. So I figure there is a difference on poundage. I figure the arrow comes out quicker out of the string. I figure the arrow has less trajectory, so in the air less, and I figure it creates a cleaner shot with the higher poundage, because even the women in Korea are shooting higher poundages. So while I agree that it's not necessary to shoot a high poundage, for me, that's what I wanted to achieve. I wanted to achieve shooting a higher poundage, similar to what an Olympian would shoot, and then see what happens. But it was still focused on shooting those 2 to 3 to 4 hours a day to see what will happen. So I hope I've covered all the questions. So summary, bow, it doesn't make a big difference. The more you spend, the better the bow will be, generally speaking. But even a cheap $150 Recurve will get you shooting in the club and get you shooting quite well. Stabilizers are really important, but even cheap stabilizers are fine. A sight is really important, and a basic sight is fine, but it will come loose. The string, to me, is one of the most important parts of the bow, and it's important the string clip on well to the nocks. It's important to have the bow set up correctly, but it's really, really important to select the right arrows and have a decent quality arrow that is going to perform for you when you shoot Recurve. Then you got the finger tap to choose, and that's basically it. So I hope that's helped you choose. And I haven't gone through all the Recurves, I've just gone through the things, because when you go through it, you've got to have your budget in mind, and when you have your budget, then you work backwards. I always work backwards from the arrows. I work arrows and then I work back into the bow, whether I'm in a $150 bow or a $500 bow or a $1,000 bow. Now people are going to say, oh, you forgot the case. Do you know what? If you're here on a budget and you're talking about cases, it's more important to have the accessories. It's more important to have better quality arrows than a case. This bow doesn't travel in a case when I go. It should travel in a case when I go. I do have a bow stand as well. Now I use this bow stand. That bow stand's $50. They come in a variety which is $20, but I like the $50 one. It's all carbon. It matches my bow, so it looks cool. But basically, enjoy your archery, shoot lots of arrows and see what happens. To me, if you're shooting lots of arrows every day, it doesn't matter if your bow is $150 or $2,000, because you're spending time doing a sport you enjoy and you're setting goals for yourself. And if you're shooting 100 an hour, 2 hours a day, the $150 bow, what it's going to do is a training aid to strengthen your body. So when I say it doesn't matter, you're using the $150 bow to strengthen your body, so eventually you can get a stronger bow. So it never worries me whether someone buys a $150 bow up front or a $2,000 bow up front. I would always recommend the lower cost bow. I tend to be pretty tight with money, so I'd recommend the cheaper bow to start with, until you get to the stage where you're like, actually I'm doing this a lot, I'm shooting lots of arrows. I have a customer who brought a bow from me 3 weeks ago, 30 pounds. He said, Stephen, I'm shooting 240 arrows a day. I'm shooting between 3 and 4 hours a day. The bow was $500 all up. Now for him, he goes, I'm really enjoying it. 4 hours a day, 240 arrows. I have no issue if he buys himself a $2,000 bow, because the $2,000 bow is definitely better than the $500 bow. It feels faster to shoot, feels nicer to shoot. So I have no question at all for that customer who's retired, him buying a $2,000 bow, he will appreciate the bow. He'll go, oh, this is so much better. He's not ready to make it to a club yet to shoot because he wants to improve his archery. And the poundage, he's going, well, I'm finding the 30 pounds a bit light, but I'm not ready to make a step up. And I think part of that is he's thinking about, well, do I change from my bow to a higher quality bow? And when he does that, that's when he'll make the jump in poundage. But it still gets back to what poundage he jumps to. He said to me, oh, maybe I should jump to 40 pounds. To me, 40 pounds is a big jump, and you can adjust the weight on these bows. You go up by about roughly 3 to 4 pounds and down by about 2 pounds, roughly, on a bow. Now, I tend not to do that. I tend to just buy new limbs. It's not because I'm loaded with money or anything like that. It's just like 2 pounds, I can't really notice much difference in 2 pounds. So when I make the jump, I jump from 32 to 36, 4 pounds. I felt that difference. And I try and work through the 36 pounds, and I did wind up the 36 pound bow to 38, 40 pounds before I jumped to the 42. But I still noticed a difference at 42. It really hurt. So I hope that's answered your questions on buying a recurve bow. But shop around, check the prices, and know how to set up the bow. Know what you're looking for and have the ideas in your head before you walk into an archery shop, because it's going to make your life easier and much, much quicker, and especially the shop's life much, much easier to set you up. And you're not, hopefully, touch wood, you won't get ripped off. So I'm Stephen Hann from Archery Supplies. Enjoy your archery and enjoy your day. Thank you. Bye.